Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So how have you been doing? Happy New Year! Yay! 2022! Woo-hoo-hoo. I don't know what to say, mate. I just hope the next year is gonna be gentler than the previous one. As gentle as can be towards you, because the last one was hee. We like to have fun here with all kinds of soothing and creative content like sewing, pattern making, painting, and all sorts of other arts and crafts. I like to show up here and show you an unpretentious good time, inspire you, and maybe help you escape from time to time from the rather bleak times we're going through, at least most of us. Actually, I'm rather looking forward to put the mock-up on my body for this week's project, because I know for a fact that the garment I'm making right now is of good cotton quality, which is almost instantly going to relieve at least some of my back pain. I feel like I should put kind of a trigger warning here, because we are going to be making a corset and talking a lot about corsets in general. Waist reduction is going to be mentioned and shown. So if you think that corsets are inherently patriarchal torture devices, this isn't the kind of content that is going to sit well with you. Also, you're wrong, and we have been fed garbage history by popular culture for decades, pretty much about everything that women do and wear and think and say. And bottom line, it's my body, it's my business, it's not yours. I make my choices. They are informed by facts. Honestly, you should respect that. And if you don't, and this makes you really angry, then go be mad and go watch something else. So the corset I'm working on today comes from a free corset pattern on the internet. Thank you very much to the one who made it available. Her name is Aurania Black. That's her blogging name anyway. Her blog is about corset making. I've put a link to it in the description box down below. This time I've chosen the 1888 riding corset Violetta, which is essentially the Victorian equivalent of a sports bra. In fact, you could call this a sports corset. So I want to take a second here to take my waist measurement. Okay. So before the corset, my waist is 28 inches. Okay, so what do we have here? So my waist now measures 25.5 inches approximately. There's 2 inches of waist reduction right now, which seems a lot worse than it actually is. Like, if you want to wear heavy skirts with petticoats and even perhaps a little bit of padding or whatever, and you want to hold it only with a belt, for maybe slightly less waist reduction, the belt is going to be much more uncomfortable. So what a belt would do with these clothes is you'd have to close it super tight to hold and support all of these heavy garments, these cottons and wools and flannels and whatnot, which would not hold very well, first of all, and second of all, this belt would dig into your body and put all the weight and the pressure on this single point of your torso. But what the corset does is that it diffuses all the weight and the pressure brought on by the clothes over all the torso. The mock-up looks pretty good as is, so for the first time in my corset making history, I'll be going straight from the first mock-up to making the final garment. I'm excited! So the main fabric for the 1888 riding corset Violetta is gonna be this peach embroidered coutil. It looks pretty good for a Victorian corset. Coutil was a fabric that they would use to make such a garment. For the most part, I think that I'm gonna be pretty close to historically accurate. This lace is gonna be decorating the top of my corset. There's gonna be this silk ribbon woven through those little notches here. I have different embroidery thread for my flossing. For those of you who don't know, flossing is those little bits of embroidery at the ends of boning channels to make the bone really lay flat against the fabric and prevent it from trying to poke through your fabric. I don't know exactly which ones I'm gonna be using, so I guess I'm gonna go get my pattern, trace it out on the coutil, and we'll go from there. Corsetry is a really precise art. If my seam lines are off even by a millimeter, it can have a really adverse effect on the fit, which is why I need to make sure that my panels are perfectly symmetrical. To do that, I'm sandwiching my two layers together, right sides facing each other, and patterns matching, and I'm going over each seam line by machine to thread mark them on both sides. With all my seam lines done this way, it's really easy to go over them with my water-soluble fabric marker, and when all my panels are marked and separated from each other with the seam ripper, I'll be able to thread mark everything again by machine so that my markings are truly stable and visible on both sides of the fabric. When I make a corset, I like to make as much work as I can while the panels are still flat. So I worked on this panel a little bit yesterday and kept this one for demonstration. As you can see, I've laid out a bias strip here to make two boning channels. There's another strip here that's gonna be mirrored on this side of the corset, and there's another strip here that needs to be laid on top. I might remove this strip and sew it again just because there's a curve here that doesn't need to be there. So there are long strips of fabric at the center fronts and at the center backs. The one at the front is to hold the busk. So I've sewn the panels together, right sides facing each other. I've pressed them to the right side and also pressed the seam allowance. And on this side, I've marked all my puncture points where the little busk handles here are gonna poke through the fabric. And then I'll be able to flip this like this and sew a couple of boning channels to the side. So this tool is called an awl. I'm gonna use this to puncture my fabric for the little handles of the busk. There you go. These are the little handles that are gonna hold the corset together like so. So this is my little placket. So because the little eyes of the busk need to go through the fabric layers and attach themselves to these little handles, I marked where the little handles needed to go through on this seam line. And so when I stitched, I made a little back stitch there, skipped over this little bit, and then backstitch, sew to that point and backstitch again, skip over, backstitch, etc. This leaves little holes here through which I can pass the, let's call them eyes, of my busk. I like to do this part while the corset is still kind of flat. As I've already mentioned earlier, corsetry is an extremely precise form of art and I need to stick to my exact seam lines. There are 2 front darts on this corset, so I'm taking the time to baste them by hand before going over those seams with the machine. I can finish sewing my front placket. By sewing a parallel line a fat 1/4 inch away from the bust, I'm forming a boning channel right beside it. This is a really good time to add as many of the boning channels as I can while the panels are still unattached. Okay, so my busk is done on both front sides. I still need to do my gores, but the front is done. Now I can work on my last back panel. After I've done those 2 boning channels, I can deal with the back closure. So this is my back placket, which is going to be sewn on the wrong side of the fabric. And then when I bring it towards the front, my back placket will close over this, so all the raw ends will be hidden. I've got a lot of work done and a lot of work to do yet. So off camera, I've done this half of the corset. I've yet to put the gores, and there's a couple of boning channels left to do on this one. So we'll deal with that later. Today, what I hope to be able to do is bring this corset half as far as that one. To do this, I need to bring my side seam together, and then there's a track for a boning channel that kind of lays on top of it. And then I need to cut all my slits open for the gores. So there's 2 slits for bust gores and 3 slits for hip gores. I need to cut these open and line them with double folded bias tape. This is gonna take a while because that bias tape, it looks better if I do most of it by hand. I guess we'll see what we can get done today. I have my work cut out for me. All right. I managed to do a lot yesterday. I even got to start working on my gores. I did them all on one half of the corset. And I've even started working on them on the second half of the corset. So today I need to finish that and then add some additional boning channels. And then I think I'll be able to put my eyelets in there to be able to lace the corset and try it on for the first time. As you can see, the edges are pinked because this is quite heavy fabric. I didn't want to fold it under and then whip stitch it in place because I didn't want to add any additional layers. As you can see on this little hip gore here, all my seam lines are thread marked. We match the tip of the gore with the tip of the slit here. And then I'm using this thread marked line as a guide to bring the edge of my slit against it. And I'm gonna sew it in place using temporary basting stitches like these ones. After I'm done, I'm gonna bring this to the sewing machine and sew them in place permanently. I'm gonna get back to it and we'll recon later. I go with a 1/4 inch plastic boning only because it's convenient, it sells by the roll, and I use it for many different projects. So I'm gonna make another piece of boning, just like this one, and I'll put the 2 bones inside of the tube, and then I'll bring it to the sewing machine to sew in between the bones and force them apart. I went through a technical problem, so the remainder of the tutorial will be voiceovered. 3 things were left to do at that point. I needed to floss my corset, decorate it with lace and ribbon insertion, and find a suitable lacing material. I chose to floss the top and bottom of my corset to hold the boning firmly in place, as well as the waist for decoration. The top had to be done first and could be very simple since it was going to be hidden by the lace later on. It wasn't really necessary to do this, but I like just knowing that the period appropriate embroidery is sitting right under there. On top of my double boning channels, I embroidered a little heart out of 2 slightly different shades of peach, 1/2 of the heart over each single boning channel. After that, I could insert my ribbon into the lace and sew the lace in place at the top edge of the corset. I made a few hidden stitches here and there across the ribbon to avoid having it travel and roll in itself. With the lace and ribbon sewn to the corset, I had a clearer idea of my color scheme and of what embroidery thread to use. I flossed the same motif at the bottom and at the waist of each individual boning channel. For the bottom, I wanted something floral and elegant, so I went with a row of stacked double X's, starting with light pink and adding 2 shades of green, and finally 1 ivory to mimic leaves, and then adding a stem at the top with the ivory. The stem was decorated with 3 sets of smaller stems, and then the thread got tied and snipped off on the wrong side of the garment. Starting with the ivory, I'm making a double X across the waistline. Using the lighter shade of pink, I'm doing another double X right under the ivory one. Using the darker shade of pink, I'm doing yet another double X, but this time right over the ivory. This creates a nice woven effect and complements the top lace, the main fabric and the bottom flossing. And with that, the garment is complete. Okay, so this is what the corset looks like on me. It looks very beautiful. I really love the silhouette it gives me. It's very period accurate. It doesn't feel as tight as I thought it would. I have no trouble breathing at all because, contrary to popular belief, our lungs aren't at our waist. There's plenty enough room for my diaphragm to move my rib cage out and in. There's no more like shortness of breath than I would have if I didn't wear the corset. The corset provides really good back support. The Victorian corsets were usually boned with baleen, which is another word for whalebone. But circa now, the killing of whales is frowned upon. So I went with plastic boning instead. It's 1/4 inch plastic boning. And my ribbon, well, it does look period accurate, but this one is polyester double-faced ribbon. Every single one of my attempts to lace my corset with something that's made of natural fibers resulted in a big-ass fail. I'll take a wearable garment over a perfectly historically accurate garment anytime. For cinema, television, the theater, and historical reenactments and so on, this is very solid work, and I think it's gonna be in my wardrobe for a long time. So before my final words, let me just slip into some period adjacent clothes. So these are my 1890 bicycle bloomers, by the way, and the corset is from 1888, so it's credible. All right. Okay, so normally I would be wearing a corset cover between my corset and my shirt. A corset cover is kind of a camisole-like garment that you put between your corset and your outer layers. What's really cool about a corset is that it behaves kind of like a really hard, solid, and stable canvas onto which you can literally pin your clothes so that they don't go anywhere. So it's what I'm gonna do today to demonstrate how practical corsets actually are. I'm taking a sewing pin. There we go. So I got one in the front and one pin in the back, which for today's demonstration I think is going to be just fine. I can now finally tie up my pants. These are the 1890s #1 bicycle bloomers from Bikes and Bloomers. That's another free pattern on the internet. And there we have it in action, the 1888 riding corset Viota from Aurelia Black's blog. It doesn't cover the back, and it doesn't cover the hips either, so I have plenty of room to move about. A corset cover would have a lot of frills around the bust, which would kind of fill this out and smooth that little bit of sharpness here. I'm gonna get to it eventually. I have a lot of things to sew. I would like to thank you very, very much for watching. It was a treat to film that for you. If you were afraid of corsets, I hope I've maybe calmed your fears a little. Or have you too made your own corsets? If so, I would very much like to know about them. So shoot me links to your makes in the description box down below because I would very much like to see them. I know I haven't been posting a lot. I think I'm down to like 1 video a month now. So until the next video, I hope you have some fun. I hope you can take care of yourself, take care of those around you. Make sure you drink plenty of water. If you like this video, make sure you give it a good thumbs up or maybe even subscribe to this channel. We're here, I guess, at least once a month on Fridays. I guess I will see you next time. Bye!